On the agenda tonight, we're going back to 1964. We're going to be taking a look at Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, and they're going to be performing You've Really Got a Hold on Me. Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus, and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. So this performance is only 3 minutes and 40 seconds in length, so we'll watch it the whole way through. And for reference, this is when they were still known as just the Miracles and not Smokey Robinson and the Miracles. But anyway, let's get the guys up on screen and see how they get on. And there we have it. There is so much to point out about that performance, because right in the intro, we've got a little bit of a crackle in Smokey's voice, and this is around G4, A4, that kind of area. So this is something that will happen when you've got a band that were as successful as these guys, touring all the time, performing night after night, and also belting in chest voice. It can take its toll. So given that his voice is a little bit crackly on that A4 and G4 in the intro, You then get an understanding of how well Smokey Robinson could control his voice, also blend his head voice with his chest voice and have that mixed voice going on as well. He does flip into falsetto sometimes. So he's saving his voice but still giving a fantastic performance. Just a quick word about this song, because it was one of those that blew up in the 60s. Smokey wrote it and released it in 1962 with The Miracles, but it was one of those that loads of other bands and artists covered in the 60s. And a lot of people think of the Beatles when they hear this song, but it was definitely Smokey who wrote it, performed it first. And it just seemed to be the way of it in the 60s. As soon as there was a very popular song that sold very well, it would be covered by multiple artists pretty much instantly after that initial release by the artist or the band who wrote it in the first place and had that first ever release. So you sometimes got the same song in the charts at the same time by multiple artists. The song would go on to pick up a Grammy Hall of Fame award. We have Bobby Rogers here on that co-lead vocal, also Pete Moore and Ronald White performing not only the vocals in the background for the choruses, but you've got this setup of Smokey being very much the focal point and the front man, and then the three behind doing more choreography and putting on such a show as a whole. You can tell that this is 100% live vocally with the band as well, who are set up off to the side of the stage. We do have Marv Tarplin here playing his guitar in the background, joining the guys on stage. But with this performance from an entertainment perspective, we've got the choreography going on. And this is something that really started to take off in the early 60s. But to give you an idea of how prevalent it wasn't mainstream yet, because these guys were working with Charlie Atkins, who went on to work with the Temptations, the Four Tops, the Supremes, but these were the first band to work with Charlie Atkins on Motown. So this was something a little bit revolutionary going on here. You can see the effect of that choreography by the way that the audience is screaming and really getting into this, but also listen out for about 2 minutes and 40 seconds where Bobby asks the crowd to sing along and brings them into the performance, effectively bringing them on stage and including them in the performance. And when you do that as a band or an artist, it just makes the crowd feel involved and they do get into it, and it's almost like a big sing-along. I just want to show you guys a quick example of the way that Smokey Robinson navigates his way through this performance using all of his vocal registers, head voice, mixed voice, chest voice, falsetto as well, in order to give such a great vocal performance, even though he might not have the top end of his chest voice available because of a little bit of vocal fatigue, but you won't notice that because he's so good at managing his vocal cords and his vocal registers. We're going to jump in straight away. Listen out to falsetto, the way that Smokey just changes to that register in order to get the high notes in this little vocal ad-lib. And there we have it, that chest voice breaking off into falsetto, coming back into chest voice. So he's still getting all of the notes that you want to hear, but he's managing those vocal cords, he's managing the airflow and not putting too much air through those vocal cords in chest voice and belting. When you've got someone as good as Smokey singing, you're not really going to take this in as a vocal register change. It's just a change of expression. We're going to have another look at a great example of this, the way that Smokey is just lightening up on his sound and not bringing up the weight of chest voice. He's just flipping over into falsetto and head voice as well. He's got such a clean head voice sound, which I will just isolate a little bit later on. You can hear some crazy notes that he is hitting in head voice, but listen out for this little flip over again to a much lighter chord configuration in order to get these higher notes without the stress of chest voice. So you can hear the way that he flips up into what sounds like a little bit more of a head voice sound, But then as soon as the pitch decreases, he gets back into his chest voice. So you get such a change in expression, and there's such light and shade between these vocal registers. It's going to make it so interesting to listen to. I've just rewound the video because we're going to watch this vocal phrase again, but I'm going to allow the video to run on because there's a great example of Smokey using his head voice where he gets such a clean connection and sings some crazy notes. He also does this sometimes for a fraction of a second before then getting into his chest voice. It's just a little squeak you'll hear before he then starts with the rest of that vocal phrase. But let's have a little listen. And there you would have heard it on squeeze, the way that Smokey goes up to an F5, it might actually be a G5, all the way up there. If you've got your guitars out, that's the 15th fret of your high E string. Seriously high note there, just in head voice. Such a clean connection that you got on that note. And you might have heard previously that split second connection in head voice that I mentioned before we got back into watching the video. Just to give you guys an idea of the range being covered here, in the background, well, with that co-lead vocal, Bobby is in and around G3, and when we compare that with Smokey up front, he's going to be in and around that E4, G4, A4 as well, and the notes that I've just mentioned, that F5 and the G5, seriously high. When you then consider that we've gone from G3 to G5, it gives you an idea of the ability these guys had within their range as a group to take you on such a journey, because we've got 2 octaves worth of range here. Just to show you guys the chords very quickly, it's not going to be an instructional video, but we are in C here, and with the verse, you might want to pick through that kind of thing. You can apply rhythm to this as well if you want to. The kind of like that, very relaxed approach to the rhythm. When we get into the rest of the song, we make our way into the C7th, into an F, and we actually have a D7th, and you want to put your F sharp in there as well, into a G, which then goes back into the C. And that's pretty much going to be it. The thing to point out here is the way that we have the same melodies going on the whole time, regardless of the chord changes. And what I mean by that is that all of the chords that are being changed to share the same notes that are being sung in the melody. So to give you guys an example of this, if I take the chords that I've just played through with the C, and I take the melody, la 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 la, I change to the A minor, la 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 la, same notes, still works, F, la 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 la, same notes, still works, G, la 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 la. That last note is waiting to be resolved into the C. I'm going to play that again. La 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 la. The last note is a C. That's why it sounds like it's going to be leading into the next chord, which it does. And this is all just the way it's being composed by Smokey with the melody over the top. But the great thing about this is it means that you can have various chord changes that share the same notes within their chords of the vocal melody. So it means that when you change to another chord, you're not starting a whole new melody line. You've now got the relevance of that previous melody line that you've just sung, and it's going to sound a lot more familiar because you've already heard it, but it's going to sound different because of the underlying chords. The only two chords I didn't just throw in there were the C 7th and la 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 la. Still fine. The other one was the little jump up from the F, la 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 la, to that D 7th, la 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 la, into the G, la 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 la. So you can hear it's all just overlapping. Every note that we're hearing exists in all of the separate chords that we're playing. If you played a chord that didn't include these notes, then it will just sound bad and it's going to clash. And that's the point. That's why Smokey has done this, to take you on a journey with the chord progression, but give you a familiar melody throughout. I don't want this video to go on for too long, but I do want to cover some of the history. They started singing at school together, aged 11, and in 1958 is when they became known as the Miracles, and this is when Claudette Rogers joined in with the group as well, and her brother Sonny left for the army at that point. Claudette and Smokey got married the next year, 1959. As a band, they auditioned for Brunswick Records, but they were rejected because the record label said that there was already another band called the Platters who had a female member, so they thought it wouldn't work. But Berry Gordy saw these guys auditioning and he liked Smokey's voice. He also saw the fact that Smokey had a diary or a songbook with loads of songs in there. So he agreed to work with the guys and record some songs. And it was Smokey that told Berry to set up his own record label, which Berry did. And as you may or may not know, that would then turn into Motown Records. So they recorded and released Got a Job in 1958. And this was a bit of a play on the song by the Silhouettes called Get a Job. They then released Bad Girl, which was their first charting single. It made it into the top 100 of the charts. And in 1960, they released Way Over There, and that turned into a national hit. Shop Around followed, and a monster hit called Who's Lovin' You became their first #1 in the R&B charts, and it just missed out on #1 in the mainstream charts, getting to #2, and it went on to sell over 1 million copies. In 1961, Smokey became ill with Asian flu, so was bedridden for about a month. Claudette then had to lead the band at that point, but she was involved in a car accident and had a miscarriage, so it was a difficult start to the 60s. But in 1962 is when they released this song, You've Really Got a Hold on Me, and that was a huge hit. It got into the top 10 of the charts. These guys were becoming known as the Showstoppers because of their live performances and just stealing the show wherever they performed. At this time, they were a national sensation. They were the top-selling Motown act. They wrote their own songs as well, which was rare. Other artists and bands were having songs written for them. And not only did they write their own songs, but they wrote songs for other acts. And some of these songs included My Girl, Get Ready, My Guy, just monster hits that were written by not only Smokey, but the rest of these guys. And in 1964, Smokey then became the vice president of Motown Records, and Claudette decided to retire in 1964 because of the stresses and strains of touring. Sadly, she had had 6 miscarriages up to that point. Just to mention as well that the performance we've just watched is from the Tammy Awards in 1964, where all of the big names and artists of that time performed. You had the Supremes, Chuck Berry, James Brown, Marvin Gaye, the Rolling Stones as well, who I believe had to follow James Brown, and that's something that Keith Richards said was the worst decision of their career. But anyway, that explains the audience as well, because it was very much a teenage event. It was the year after this, in 1965, that they then changed the name to Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, and they were still having continued hits in the charts. They then released their monster album, which was called Going to a Go-Go, and at this point, other bands, British bands especially, started covering their hits. Bands like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Who as well. They appeared on TV a lot. They were making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And in 1968 is when they released their second greatest hits album. So that gives you an idea of their success up to that point. In 1970, they had another monster hit, and this was called The Tears of a Clown, and that got to #1 here in the UK, as well as #1 in the USA. They had their own TV special that same year that was called The Smokey Robinson Show, and in 1972 is when Smokey then went solo, and he had been wanting to do that for 2 years, but because of the success of The Tears of a Clown, he stayed with the band, and he said that he would for another 2 years, and he was true to his word, and in 1972 he was replaced by Billy Griffin. But the miracles continued, as did Smokey Robinson, and in 2001, as a vocal group, they were inducted into the Vocal Group Hall of Fame. In 2004, they made it to number 32 in Rolling Stone's 100 Greatest Artists of All Time. They got their stars in 2009 on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. They were just the band that made Motown, and also Stevie Wonder said that there would be no Stevie Wonder without Smokey Robinson and the Miracles. In 2012, the whole band were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and rather controversially, Smokey had already been inducted 25 years previously, and he said himself that he felt bad about that because all of the guys should have been inducted, but it's just the way that it worked with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But thankfully, they did all get in there in 2012. But it's great to have a look back at them here in full flow, and also the way that Smokey manages that vocal, and the guys as a whole with the choreography, really pushing the boundaries of performances live, and this is why they were called the Showstoppers. Thank you guys so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!